Many YouTube channels have seen a drastic drop in their revenues in this past week, including my own. Prominent YouTube creators are lamenting this and even complaining that this might be the end of the platform for them. I've noticed, however, that very few seem to be telling the full story. So in this short video, I'm going to break it down for you. Why is this happening, and how bad is the problem really? First, here is TJ Kirk, also known as the Amazing Atheist, describing how the loss of revenue is impacting him.
I mean, look at my channel views versus my revenue for the past 28 days. You notice those two lines that seem to be kind of in tandem? And then at the very end, one line just kind of crashes into oblivion? Well, that line is my revenue. And every channel I know of is experiencing the same thing. Now, the channels I know of tend to be more controversial channels.
From there, TJ goes on to speculate that the reason he's seeing this loss of revenue is because he's a controversial figure, and so some of his videos are being demonetized. There's probably some truth to that, but there's also more to it. Now, TJ's graph doesn't have any numbers on it, so I wasn't really sure what he was seeing. But when I saw it, I was inspired to look at my own. Here it is. As you can see, even though my channel is only about 1% of the size of TJ's, I've also been seeing a rather drastic drop in revenue. I don't know the numbers for any other channel, but I can do the math for my own, and I assume that others are seeing something similar. What I discovered was that where I was making about $2 for every 1,000 views prior to the drop, I am now making only $1. So that's a serious reduction. My revenue stream has been cut in half. Now, I do this as a hobby and not a full-time job, so it really doesn't impact me in my personal life all that much. But if other YouTubers who have made creating content into their careers are seeing similar drops in their revenue, I can see why they'd be very concerned. But the important thing to understand here is that there are actually two factors that are impacting the bottom line for YouTube creators. The first is what everyone is talking about, the demonetization of videos. Creators are discovering that videos that used to be bringing them revenue have suddenly been flagged as no longer appropriate. Here's YouTube's little chart explaining their monetization system. The little icon next to each video tells you whether or not a video is actively being monetized. If you've got a nice little green dollar sign, you're good. But creators are seeing green dollar signs suddenly being changed to yellow. Unfortunately, that yellow sign is a bit ambiguous. It can mean anything from the video being flagged as now being under review to a formerly acceptable video now being flagged as inappropriate. Now, you would think that my 50% drop in revenue must have come because some of my videos have been demonetized in this way, right? That's what I thought too. I mean, I know that I often talk about sexism and feminism in video games, and those topics are allegedly subject to coming under this kind of review. But in looking at it, I saw that all of my videos are still happily in the green. So if I'm not being actively demonetized, why are my revenues down? The answer is the second factor that isn't being talked about as much as is the demonetization issue. About 250 advertisers have pulled their ads from YouTube. The estimate is that this may result in a loss of about $750 million in ad revenue for Google, which in turn means that Google has that much fewer ads to go around for all the creators. My thinking is that it's the pulling of the ads from YouTube that is doing the harm much more than is the demonetization of controversial content. I don't yet have data on the other channels, but my suspicion is that revenue is down across the board. Anyone and everyone who is making YouTube videos is likely feeling the impact, even if they're not creating controversial content. So the next logical question is, why did all these advertisers pull their money from YouTube? Now, many of my fellow YouTube creators are saying that it is because they simply don't want to be associated with controversial or potentially offensive content. They point to the stories about PewDiePie and Breitbart. There is some truth to this, and clearly YouTube is aggressively reviewing videos. and some of the more allegedly controversial ones are being flagged yellow. Losing $750 million in ad revenue is a big deal and demands a reaction, so I don't blame Google for doing all that they can do to win back those advertisers. But in researching this, I discovered that there's an even bigger story than the PewDiePie controversy, but that I haven't seen it much reported by my fellow YouTube creators. It looks to me that the real source of the problem here starts a week before the PewDiePie thing with this article from the UK Times. What this paper uncovered was that sometimes ads from companies like Mercedes-Benz were showing up in Islamist recruitment videos for groups like ISIS. Furthermore, that Google and YouTube don't have a good way to prevent this from happening. This means that these 250 companies that are now part of the boycott may have been unwittingly sending some of their ad money to fund jihadists. Now, I don't know about you, but once I learned this, I suddenly had a whole new perspective on the problem. If I were the head of marketing for, say, Verizon or McDonald's, I might have pulled my ad money from Google too. I mean, the last thing you want is for the brand of your company to be associated with financing terrorism. Now, I don't know how all this is going to play out, and I really do feel for guys like TJ who are facing a drastic drop in their channel's revenue while Google and YouTube try to figure things out. But at the same time, I can empathize with the advertisers who have decided to boycott until they do. My own view on this controversy is to wait and see. I believe that things will eventually return to a more normal state simply because there's too much money at stake on the one hand for YouTube and too many views being lost during the boycott for the advertisers on the other. So my bet is that, although it may be a rocky next few months, the advertising money will come back once YouTube figures out how to keep it out of the hands of terrorists. And then our favorite channels, even the controversial ones, will return to having revenue streams closer to what they're used to.